It always seemed like the sky waited until Jasmine Price's worst days to unleash its fury over Willow Bluff. Thunder rolled low across the fields as she pushed her way up the muddy path, every step a battle against the wind and the weight pressing down on her chest. Her sneakers slipped in the slick grass, but she didn't slow down. Not when her little brother Caleb was home alone, probably staring at the clock. Not when the mailbox still overflowed with hospital bills and condolence cards. Not when the decision, sell the house or somehow find a way to stay, hung over her like a curse she couldn't break. Lightning forked high above, painting the hills with stark white light. For a split second, Jasmine thought she saw something moving at the top of the ridge. She blinked, squinted through the rain. There, another flash, and a wild Mustang stood outlined against the storm. He was big, nearly silver, with a mane and tail that tossed like sea foam. His eyes caught the light, wide and wary, meeting hers for just an instant before he tossed his head and stomped a hoof, restless as the wind itself. Jasmine froze. She'd heard stories about the wild horses that haunted Willow Bluff, but she'd never believed she'd actually see one, especially not tonight. Especially not while she was this lost. For one breathless moment, girl and horse stared at each other, two creatures caught between fear and wonder, both fighting to stay free. The rain intensified, cold needles slicing down her jacket, drumming against the earth. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself, and tried to convince herself to keep moving. The Mustang, Spirit she found herself naming him without knowing why, shifted on the ridge as if urging her forward, eyes steady and unblinking. Then, just as Jasmine turned to head back down the path, a sound cut through the roar of the storm. It was thin, almost hidden in the wind, a cry, faint and wavering. She stopped. Was it the wind playing tricks on her, or... There it was again. Help, please. Her heart jumped. She spun in place, searching the shadows and stuttering flashes of lightning, but saw nothing except the battered willow trees and the flicker of Spirit's silhouette above. Another crack of thunder rattled her bones, and the cry came again, desperate and small. Without thinking, Jasmine ran toward it, slipping and nearly falling as she scrambled across the soggy ground. Branches whipped at her face and mud splattered up her jeans, but she pushed forward, adrenaline giving her strength. Spirit followed her movement from the ridge, head raised, nostrils flaring. For a moment, Jasmine imagined he was guiding her, guardian and witness both. She crested a small hill, breath ragged, heart hammering so loudly it almost drowned out the world. Down below, through the veils of rain, she saw the crumpled remains of the old Ford farmhouse. The roof had caved in on one side, shingles and wood strewn across the yard like broken bones. Jasmine's pulse stuttered. That house had been empty for years, everyone said so, except for Miss Eloise Ford, who sometimes came by to tend the roses her mother had planted long ago. Jasmine forced her legs to move. The grass was knee-high, slick and sharp against her skin. She tripped over a fallen branch, nearly going down, but righted herself at the last second. "Hello?" she shouted, cupping her hands around her mouth. "Is anyone there? Here." The voice was so weak Jasmine almost missed it. She darted closer, skidding to a halt at the sagging porch. The steps groaned beneath her weight, but she ignored it, driven by fear and something deeper, some raw need to help, to do something right for once. Inside, darkness pressed close, thick with dust and the stench of wet plaster. Her phone's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, finding a collapsed pile of beams and shattered glass. Underneath, pinned but alive, was Miss Ford, her white hair matted with blood and rain, her eyes wide with shock. "Oh my God, Ms. Ford!" Jasmine dropped to her knees, fingers scrabbling at the boards. The old woman tried to smile, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "Jasmine, honey, I didn't think anyone would hear me." Jasmine's throat tightened. "I've got you," she whispered, voice steady despite the panic clawing at her ribs. "I'm calling 911 right now, okay? Don't move, just stay with me." She dialed, hands shaking, relaying their location in a rush to the dispatcher. In the background, the storm redoubled its fury, thunder rattling the foundations. Jasmine held Miss Ford's hand, murmuring comfort, feeling the tremor in the old woman's grip. Above them, the Mustang's silhouette paced the ridge, mane streaming, sending out shrill, haunting whinnies that cut through the wind. Jasmine felt the hair rise on her arms. Somehow, Spirit seemed to sense the danger, as if willing someone, anyone, to notice. The walls shuddered. Debris rained down. Jasmine flung her body over Miss Ford just as a section of ceiling gave way, splinters scratching her back. She screamed, then bit it back, teeth clenched. "Help is coming, I promise." For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the sound of rain and Miss Ford's ragged breaths. Then, a new sound, the shuffle of feet, voices shouting in the distance. Spirit's neighing turned frantic, echoing across the bluff. Jasmine let herself believe, for just a moment, that maybe they wouldn't be alone in this storm after all. For a few endless seconds, Jasmine could hear nothing except her own ragged breathing and the steady beat of rain hammering the ruined farmhouse roof. Her body shielded Miss Ford from the debris, her mind screaming to stay calm, even as adrenaline threatened to overwhelm her. Somewhere outside, the Mustang's whinnies sliced through the storm, eerie and insistent. Jasmine clung to the hope that someone, anyone, would hear, that Spirit wasn't the only witness to their struggle. She reached for her phone, nearly dropping it as her fingers trembled. The dispatcher's voice buzzed from the small speaker, calm but urgent. "Stay on the line, Jasmine. Help is on the way. Are you injured? Is Miss Ford conscious?" "I'm okay," Jasmine choked out, blinking away tears. "But Miss Ford's leg is pinned. She can't move." Miss Ford gave her a small, brave smile, though pain etched deep lines across her face. "I'll manage, darling. Just don't let me fall asleep. Keep talking." Jasmine squeezed her hand, desperate to keep her present. "Remember when you made those lemon bars for the school fundraiser? Caleb still talks about them." The conversation steadied her, grounding her in the moment, even as dust and fear filled the air. She kept glancing over her shoulder, watching the ceiling above groan and shift, every thunderclap threatening to bring it all down. A part of her wanted to scream, to sob, to let the storm outside swallow her fear. But she wouldn't. Not while Miss Ford needed her. Lightning illuminated the shattered windows. For a split second, Jasmine saw Spirit again, closer this time, pacing along the fence line, tossing his mane as if urging her not to give up. He was wildness and power and hope all at once, a flash of something untamed against the chaos. "Jasmine," Miss Ford's grip tightened. "Tell me about your mother. Did she ever come here after I moved out?" The question was so gentle, so unexpected, that Jasmine's throat closed up. She nodded, wiping rain and tears from her face. She used to say this place was full of good ghosts, the kind that looked out for people, not scared them. "Smart woman," Miss Ford murmured, her voice softening. A crash overhead snapped them both back to the present. The ceiling groaned, raining dust and plaster. Jasmine shielded Miss Ford's face as another plank broke loose. "Stay with me," she said, her voice steady even as her hands shook. Suddenly, movement outside, shouts, a flashlight's beam cutting through the dark. Jasmine yelled, We're in here, help, please! She watched in awe as two hikers, drenched, faces streaked with mud, rushed onto the porch. They hesitated at the splintered doorway, then pushed inside, shining their lights over the ruin. "Oh my God," one of them breathed. "Are you okay?" Jasmine nearly collapsed with relief. "Miss Ford's trapped. Her leg. It's under the beam. Please be careful." The men knelt beside her, their hands steady but urgent. One introduced himself as Alex, the other as Mark. They assessed the damage quickly, their voices low and focused. "We're going to need to shift this beam. Jasmine, can you keep her calm?" "Mark, help me lift on 3. Jasmine knelt by Miss Ford's head, murmuring comfort as Alex and Mark braced themselves. Rain hammered the roof. Thunder rolled so close it rattled her bones. The men strained, muscles bunching, and the beam shifted just enough for Miss Ford to drag her leg free. She cried out, but Jasmine held her, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe. You're safe now." Before anyone could breathe, the ceiling above them creaked ominously. Alex's eyes went wide. "We need to get out, now!" Jasmine tried to help Miss Ford stand, but her leg buckled. Mark swooped in, lifting the elderly woman as gently as possible. Jasmine grabbed her backpack, her phone clutched so tight her knuckles turned white. The world seemed to tilt around her as they staggered for the door, Alex leading the way with the flashlight. A deafening crack split the air. The ceiling finally gave way, a wall of debris collapsing where they'd just been. Dust filled Jasmine's lungs, choking her, but she forced herself to keep moving, her only thought, get outside, get safe. They burst onto the porch, rain soaking them instantly. Jasmine gasped, looking back at the wreckage. For a moment, she could barely comprehend that they'd made it, that they'd survived what could have been a tragedy. Spirit stood at the fence line, his wild eyes locked on her, hooves pawing the muddy earth. It felt, impossibly, as if he'd called the rescuers to them, as if his urgent cries had been the signal they needed. Alex and Mark laid Miss Ford on the grass, checking her pulse and injuries. Jasmine fell to her knees beside her, overwhelmed by relief. The hikers called 911 again, relaying that everyone was safe and outside. As they waited for the ambulance, Jasmine's hands trembled. She realized she was crying, great silent tears rolling down her face. Miss Ford reached out, her fingers closing around Jasmine's. "You saved my life, honey," she whispered, voice thin but fierce. "You and that wild horse." Jasmine looked up. Spirit had already turned, vanishing into the misty dark, a living legend slipping away. But his presence lingered, a fierce, wild hope that things could get better, that help could come, even in the loneliest places. The ambulance lights flashed through the storm, sirens slicing the night. As paramedics rushed toward them, Jasmine finally let herself collapse, knowing that, for tonight at least, she was safe. But deep down, she knew the story was only beginning. The fluorescent lights of Willow Bluff General Hospital hummed overhead as Jasmine paced the hallway, shoes squeaking on polished tile. Her clothes were still damp from the storm, hair plastered to her cheeks, and the cold air in the waiting room made her shiver. Caleb had called 3 times already. "Are you okay, Jazz? When are you coming home?" But she'd promised to stay until she knew Miss Ford was all right. It was the least she could do after what they'd survived together. A nurse poked her head out from behind the desk. "Jasmine Price, Miss Ford's asking for you." Jasmine hurried down the hall, feeling the weight of exhaustion and adrenaline settle into her bones. The hospital had patched her up, a few scratches, a bruised shoulder, and insisted she eat a packet of stale vending machine crackers. But her mind stayed with the old farmhouse, the roar of the storm, the moment she thought they might never make it out. Inside the small room, Miss Ford looked frail, her leg wrapped in a thick cast and suspended by a sling. But her eyes sparkled with the same stubborn fire Jasmine remembered from childhood block parties and 4th of July picnics. She reached out, and Jasmine took her hand without hesitation. "There you are, darling," Miss Ford said, her voice raspy but determined. "Sit down before you fall down." Jasmine managed a tired smile and pulled up a chair. She didn't know what to say at first. The words tangled in her chest. The monitors beeped quietly, measuring Miss Ford's heartbeat. Their own secret music in the sterile room. For a few minutes, they just sat together, the storm now a distant memory, but still echoing in their silence. Finally, Miss Ford spoke. "You were very brave last night. Braver than anyone should have to be." Jasmine shook her head. "I just did what anyone would have done." Miss Ford squeezed her hand. "Not everyone would have run into that mess. You saved my life, Jasmine. You and that Mustang of yours." Jasmine laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. "He's not mine. I don't even know if he's real. It feels like something out of a story." Miss Ford's eyes twinkled. "Sometimes the best things in life are a little wild, a little hard to believe." She paused, her gaze drifting to the window where the morning sun was just breaking through gray clouds. "Your mother used to say that too." Jasmine's throat tightened. Memories of her mother washed over her. Afternoons spent baking, laughter in the kitchen, whispered stories in the dark. She swallowed hard. "I miss her every day. I keep thinking she'll walk through the door or call me to remind me to pay the gas bill." Miss Ford nodded, eyes shining with understanding. "Loss is funny like that. Sometimes I hear my husband's laugh in the garden or smell my daughter's perfume when I'm alone. Grief never really leaves, does it?" "No," Jasmine whispered. "It doesn't." For a while they shared stories. Miss Ford told Jasmine about her own childhood, about growing up in Willow Bluff when the streets were gravel and the horses outnumbered cars. She spoke of her daughter, Rachel, who'd left town after a fight they'd never quite forgiven. Her voice broke when she mentioned the old letters Rachel used to write, tucked away in a shoebox under her bed. Jasmine listened, her own grief finding a quiet echo in Miss Ford's words. She told her about Caleb, about trying to keep up with bills and school, about the fear of losing everything her mother had fought to keep. "Sometimes I think about selling the house," she admitted. "But then I walk through the rooms and I just can't." Miss Ford nodded. "It's hard to let go of a place filled with so much love. But you'll know what to do when the time is right. You're stronger than you think, Jasmine. Stronger than you know." The nurse brought in breakfast, interrupting their moment. Jasmine tried to leave, but Miss Ford insisted she stay, splitting her toast and apple slices. They talked about little things, the weather, the price of eggs, the way the town always came together after a storm. It was a gentle lull, a much-needed calm after the chaos of the night before. Later, as Jasmine walked down the hall, she heard a pair of orderlies whispering by the nurse's station. "That's the girl who saved old Miss Ford, right? With that wild horse. Did you see the photos online? Someone caught the Mustang on camera. Looks like something out of a movie." Jasmine's cheeks flushed. She hadn't realized her story was already spreading, hadn't thought about the way the town clung to legends and heroes. She wondered if people would believe it. Her, the Mustang, the storm. Or if it would become just another one of Willow Bluff's tall tales. She left the hospital with a strange sense of hope, lighter than she'd felt in weeks. The sun was shining now, the air clean and sweet after the rain. As she walked home, her phone buzzed. Texts from friends, neighbors, even strangers. "Are you okay? Heard about the rescue? Did you really see the wild Mustang?" Jasmine smiled to herself, imagining Spirit out there, running wild across the bluffs, untouchable and free. Maybe he'd always been there, waiting for someone to notice. That afternoon, Jasmine visited Miss Ford again, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the edge of her yard. She found the old woman sitting up, propped by pillows, sorting through a stack of worn letters. Miss Ford looked up, her face lighting with a mixture of surprise and relief. "I thought I'd lost these in the collapse," she said, holding up a letter. "Rachel wrote me every birthday, every Christmas, even after she moved away. I just never knew what to say back." Jasmine sat beside her, curiosity piqued. "Do you want to talk about her?" Miss Ford hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe I do. Maybe it's time." As they read the letters together, Jasmine felt something shift. The walls between past and present softened, the weight of grief eased by the sharing of stories. They laughed, cried, and remembered, each memory a step toward healing. Outside, the rumor of Jasmine's heroism and the mysterious Mustang began to ripple through Willow Bluff. People talked about the girl who'd run into a storm, the horse who called for help, the miracle on the hill. And in the hearts of two women, hope began to grow again, wild and stubborn, just like Spirit, just like Willow Bluff itself. The next morning dawned cool and pale, the storm a memory washed from the streets, leaving the town quiet but for the sound of birds and the distant rush of Willow Creek. Jasmine woke early, her mind still turning over the conversation with Miss Ford and the battered letters. She'd barely slept, haunted by dreams of collapsing ceilings and Spirit's wild eyes. Caleb had already left for his friend's house, a note on the fridge in his looping scrawl. "Don't worry, I'll be home for dinner. Love you, Jazz." Jasmine smiled, touching the note with her fingertips before grabbing her backpack and heading out. She reached the hospital just as the day's first rays warmed the brick facade. The air inside smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Miss Ford was awake, sitting up in bed, the shoebox of letters resting on her lap. She looked older today, Jasmine noticed, as if the events of the past few days had weighed her down. But her eyes were clear, focused with a new urgency. "Jasmine, come sit," Miss Ford said, patting the edge of the bed. "There's something I need to ask you, a favor if you're willing." Jasmine set down her bag and took a seat, bracing herself. "Of course. Anything." Miss Ford let out a shaky breath. "Those letters, my daughter's words, they're all I have left of her. I used to keep family photos in a tin box under my bed, too, but I'm afraid they might have been lost in the storm. I know the farmhouse is a mess, maybe too dangerous, but if there's any chance... Jasmine, would you go back? Would you try to save what you can?" Jasmine hesitated. The memory of the caved-in roof and the dust-choked air flashed before her. She wasn't sure she wanted to face that place again. But she saw the hope flickering in Miss Ford's face, fragile as candlelight. "I'll do it," Jasmine said, voice steady. "If there's anything left, I'll find it for you." Relief flooded Miss Ford's features. "Thank you, dear. You don't know what this means to me. It's not just the photos. It's the last piece of my life before everything changed." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, Jasmine watching as Miss Ford traced the faded ink of one letter. "Do you regret it?" Jasmine asked quietly. "The things you never said to her?" Miss Ford's hand trembled. "Every day. I let pride get in the way. If I could go back, I'd tell her I loved her, that none of the fights mattered, but I guess we only get to move forward, don't we? Jasmine nodded. The words struck deeper than she expected. She thought of her mother, of the unspoken apologies, the unsent texts, the arguments about chores and curfews that now seemed so small. Later, Jasmine stood outside the hospital, clutching a slip of paper with directions and a hand-drawn map from Miss Ford. She glanced at her phone. 3 missed calls from her aunt in Boston, probably about the house. Jasmine sent a quick text. "Busy, we'll call later," then pocketed her phone and started toward the bluff. As she walked, she noticed something different in town. People she barely knew nodded at her, some offering shy smiles or calling out, "Glad you're safe, Jasmine." Word of her rescue had spread, and with it, stories of the Mustang. "You see the wild horse too?" a young boy asked as she passed the bakery. Jasmine grinned. "I think everyone in Willow Bluff has seen him now." Spirit had become a local legend overnight. At the diner, a group of old men argued about when they'd last spotted a Mustang on the bluff. One swore he'd seen Spirit years ago. Another said wild horses hadn't been on these hills since he was a child. The rumors swirled, making the air electric with curiosity and a touch of superstition. Some claimed Spirit was a guardian spirit. Others said he was a bad omen, a warning that more trouble was coming. Jasmine just smiled to herself, holding the secret of that wild, watchful gaze close to her heart. By the time she reached the remains of the Ford farmhouse, the afternoon sun was bright and the ground soft beneath her feet. The place looked even more battered in daylight. Walls sagging, the roof caved in, mud pooled where the storm had flooded the porch. Jasmine steeled herself and picked her way inside, the boards groaning under her weight. The air was thick with damp earth and mildew, the light inside a dusty haze. She crouched near the ruined bedroom, searching for the tin box Miss Ford had described. Her fingers brushed against damp wallpaper, splinters, and finally cool metal. She pulled the box free, heart racing, and lifted the lid. A bundle of old photos, faded but intact, tied together with a ribbon. She smiled, tucking it carefully into her bag. Jasmine explored a little farther, memories of her own childhood flooding back. She remembered sleepovers in the guest room, the scent of Miss Ford's lavender soap, the way her mother used to joke that every corner of Willow Bluff held a story. It felt like coming home, even as sorrow tugged at her. Suddenly, a shadow passed by the window. Jasmine looked up, heart pounding, half expecting to see Spirit. Instead, it was Mr. Wheeler, the local mailman, who had come to check on the place. He called out, "You doing all right in there, Jasmine?" She nodded, feeling strangely comforted by the intrusion. "Just picking up a few things for Miss Ford." Mr. Wheeler nodded. "You're a good kid. Folks in town are proud of you. Just thought you should know." Jasmine flushed, unsure what to say. She hurried to finish, gathering the last of the photos and a few battered books. As she prepared to leave, she glanced out at the bluff. There, silhouetted against the sky, Spirit stood once more, still wild, still untouchable. He met her gaze, holding it for a long moment before turning away, disappearing into the sea of grass. Jasmine felt a surge of purpose. She wasn't running from her memories anymore. She was carrying them forward, for herself, for Miss Ford, for the town that had always watched over her. As she walked back toward the hospital, the tin box tucked under her arm, Jasmine knew that some stories, like Spirit's, were meant to be shared, not hidden, and some promises, once made, could change everything. Jasmine hesitated at the threshold of the ruined farmhouse, the sun now dipping low, casting long shadows across the battered porch. The day had grown warm, but a chill clung to the sagging walls, and the dampness from the storm lingered everywhere, soaking into wood and stone. She took a steadying breath, recalling Miss Ford's hopeful eyes and the gentle way she had asked for the family letters and photos. It wasn't just a box or some scraps of paper. It was all that remained of a daughter once loved, a life nearly forgotten. Jasmine set her jaw and pushed open the door, determined not to let fear turn her away. Inside, the floor creaked and shuddered under her weight. The entryway, once welcoming, now looked haunted by the violence of the storm. Plaster hung in sheets from the ceiling, light filtering through the holes like ghostly ribbons. Her flashlight's narrow beam cut across the debris, illuminating upended furniture and shards of glass. Jasmine picked her way through the wreckage, careful to test each step before committing her weight. She tried not to think about the collapse from just days earlier, or the way the ceiling had groaned overhead. Don't think. Just move, she told herself. The air in the old house was thick, heavy with rot and memories. Jasmine paused by the fireplace, running her fingers along the mantel, tracing initials that must have been carved by Miss Ford's husband, decades before. In that moment, she felt the weight of everyone who had ever lived here. Dreams, fights, laughter, regrets, all swirling together like dust in the light. She blinked hard, pushing the feeling aside, and pressed on. She found the tin box and the bundle of photos easily enough. But Miss Ford's instructions had been clear. There were more letters hidden in the back of a dresser, the old wooden kind with squeaky drawers. Jasmine crossed the living room, skirting a hole in the floor, and ducked into what had once been a cozy bedroom. The walls were warped, the bed frame bent, but the dresser was mostly intact, standing stubbornly in the corner as if refusing to surrender to the chaos around it. Kneeling carefully, Jasmine tugged at the bottom drawer. It stuck, swollen from water, but she gritted her teeth and pulled harder. With a groan, it slid open, and there, tucked in the very back, she spotted a battered envelope. Her heart thudded in her chest as she reached in and pulled it free. The envelope was thick, stuffed with folded sheets of paper, the ink faded but legible. Jasmine slipped it into her backpack, relief blooming in her chest. She was just about to stand when the floor beneath her gave a sudden, sickening crack. Her stomach lurched. Before she could scramble back, the rotten boards collapsed, dropping her into the crawl space below. She landed hard, her breath knocked from her lungs, dust and splinters filling her mouth and eyes. For a few seconds, she could only cough and blink, disoriented by the sudden plunge and the pain throbbing in her ankle. Panic surged up her spine. The gap above was too high for her to reach. The broken boards splintered and sharp. Her flashlight had skittered away, its beam flickering weakly on a heap of bricks. Jasmine's heart pounded. She fumbled for her phone, but as she pulled it from her pocket, it slipped from her grasp, landing somewhere in the dark. A curse caught in her throat. She tried to feel for it, but the ground was cluttered with debris, broken glass, and rusted nails. "Stay calm," she whispered, forcing herself to breathe slowly. "Just stay calm, Jasmine." She scanned the small space, searching for anything she could use to climb out. But the walls were slick with mud, and the nearest beam was out of reach. She called out, her voice cracking, but only silence answered. The world above seemed impossibly far away, separated by layers of broken wood and regret. Outside, the sky was darkening, clouds gathering again on the horizon. Jasmine felt the prickle of fear along her arms. The farmhouse creaked and moaned as if resenting her presence. A draft stirred the dust, chilling her skin. The loneliness pressed in, heavy and absolute, and for the first time since the storm, she felt truly alone. She thought of Miss Ford in her hospital bed, of Caleb at home waiting for dinner, of her mother's voice urging her to be brave. The urge to cry was fierce, but Jasmine gritted her teeth. She wouldn't give in, not now. Suddenly, the wind picked up, howling through the broken windows. A distant rumble of thunder echoed across the bluff, and with it, the memory of Spirit, the wild Mustang, his eyes bright with something almost human. Jasmine closed her eyes, imagining his silhouette on the ridge, watching, waiting. She clung to that image, letting it fill her with stubborn hope. Time seemed to slow in the darkness. Jasmine tried again to find her phone, reaching blindly until her fingers grazed the familiar shape. She snatched it up, relief flooding her, only to realize with a sinking heart that the screen was shattered and the battery was nearly dead. She pressed the emergency call button, but there was no signal down here, not through so much wreckage. She screamed for help, the sound swallowed by the walls. Tears burned her eyes, but she fought them back. She forced herself to focus. If no one was coming, she'd have to get herself out. She searched the dirt for anything sturdy, her fingers finally finding a length of old pipe. Gritting her teeth, Jasmine braced it against the wall and tried to lever herself up. The effort sent pain shooting through her ankle, but she kept pushing, muscles trembling with strain. Above, lightning split the sky. For a brief moment, its glow filtered through the cracks, illuminating the farmhouse with ghostly light. Jasmine thought she heard a sound, a whinny, wild and urgent, carried on the wind. Her heart leaped. "Spirit," she whispered, not sure if she was calling for the horse or just hoping the world still cared. The storm outside built and built, thunder shaking the ground beneath her. Jasmine clung to the pipe, sweat mingling with tears and mud. She would not give up. She would not let fear win. And as the wind howled and rain began to fall once more, Jasmine steeled herself for the fight, knowing somehow she wasn't as alone as she felt. The darkness in the crawl space pressed down on Jasmine like a heavy, wet blanket. Every shallow breath drew in the earthy, metallic scent of rain-soaked wood and ancient dust. Her ankle throbbed in waves, making it hard to focus, but she refused to let the panic win. Above her, lightning flickered through the shattered beams, carving strange, shifting patterns on the walls. Each boom of thunder made the floorboards shudder and Jasmine flinch. She gripped the pipe in her hands so tightly that her knuckles ached. Time twisted down there, stretching out each second until it felt like she'd been trapped for hours. She screamed for help until her voice was raw. She tried again to wedge the pipe under a sturdy joist, pushing and heaving, but the angle was wrong, and her injured ankle sent daggers of pain up her leg. Despair gnawed at her resolve, telling her she'd never get out, that the farmhouse would become her tomb, her voice one more ghost for Willow Bluff to whisper about. She pressed her forehead to her knees and squeezed her eyes shut, letting memories of her mother flood her mind. She pictured Mom's hands, steady and gentle, her voice humming old lullabies when storms raged outside. For a moment, Jasmine let herself cry, her tears hot and silent in the shadows. If she gave up, Caleb would have no one. Miss Ford would never see those letters. The past and the future would both be lost in this ruined place. Then, through the rumble of thunder and the pounding rain, Jasmine heard a new sound, a rhythmic, heavy thud, like hooves striking earth. Her head jerked up. For a heartbeat, she wondered if she was imagining it, if her mind was conjuring hope from thin air. But then it came again, closer this time, unmistakable. Above, on the ruined floor, dust sifted down with every impact. Jasmine blinked against it, heart pounding. The sound grew louder, more urgent. She craned her neck, squinting through the gloom, and saw through a crack in the floorboards the unmistakable shape of 4 legs, a wild mane, and silver-gray hide. It was Spirit. The Mustang was restless, pacing above her, snorting and pawing at the wood. Each powerful strike sent tremors through the house. Jasmine's breath caught. It was as if he sensed her distress, as if he knew exactly where she was and what she needed. His nostrils flared, dark eyes wide and wild. For a moment their gazes locked through the gap, and Jasmine felt something electric, a connection that transcended words or reason. "Spirit," she called, her voice hoarse but desperate. "I'm down here, please." As if in answer, Spirit reared back and slammed his hooves onto the weakened boards. The wood cracked and splintered under his weight, sending chunks tumbling into the crawl space. Jasmine shielded her face, coughing as dust billowed around her. Spirit struck again, more forceful this time, his powerful muscles bunching beneath his hide. The boards above Jasmine's head gave a tortured groan, then split open entirely, daylight streaming in through the gap. Hope surged in Jasmine's chest. She scrambled toward the opening, using her good leg to push herself up. She wedged her hands into the split and pulled, ignoring the sting of splinters and the agony in her ankle. Spirit stepped back, his huge, wild face looming over the hole. He lowered his head, nostrils twitching, then let out a shrill whinny that echoed over the bluff and into the storm. With every ounce of strength, Jasmine hauled herself up, her muscles screaming, and caught the edge of the floor. She braced her feet against a half-rotted beam, pushed, and finally tumbled up and out onto the main floor. Gasping for air, she rolled onto her back and lay there, trembling and stunned, as the storm raged outside. Spirit circled her warily, close enough for Jasmine to feel his breath on her skin. His mane was tangled and soaked, eyes flashing with that wild, untamable light. Jasmine reached out, not sure if he'd let her touch him. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, survivor and savior. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. She buried her face in Spirit's neck, breathing in his musky rain-damp scent. The Mustang stood perfectly still, only the slightest tremor running through his powerful body. It was as if he understood everything, the danger, the fear, the hope Jasmine clung to. Outside, thunder crashed again, louder than ever. Spirit pulled away gently, tossing his head as if urging Jasmine to move. She forced herself to her feet, leaning on a splintered table for support. Her ankle burned, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She stuffed Miss Ford's letters and photos into her backpack, double-checked she had her phone and flashlight, and hobbled toward the door. The wind nearly knocked her down as she stepped outside. Rain lashed her face, mixing with sweat and tears. Jasmine paused on the porch, turning to look back at Spirit. The Mustang stood framed in the ruined doorway, his silhouette fierce and proud against the stormy sky. "Go," she said softly, her voice swallowed by the wind. "Be free." Spirit whinnied once, a wild, ringing sound, then bolted down the path, mane streaming, hooves kicking up sheets of mud. He vanished into the dusk, leaving Jasmine alone but not afraid. She knew now she would never be truly alone again. She limped down the hill, clutching her backpack to her chest. The pain in her ankle was real, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in weeks. She had faced fear, trusted in hope, and found a wild kind of strength. As the last of the storm broke over Willow Bluff, Jasmine whispered a promise to the wind. She would never forget this night, or the Mustang who had saved her, not with magic, but with the raw, impossible power of compassion and connection. And somewhere in the shadows, Spirit's story galloped on. Jasmine awoke the next morning in her own bed, sunlight peeking through faded curtains, the scent of rain and wildflowers drifting in from her open window. Her ankle was wrapped tightly, propped on a pillow, throbbing with every movement, a reminder that her harrowing escape hadn't been a fever dream. Her whole body ached, but it was a clean ache, proof that she was alive, home, and safe. The house was quiet. Caleb had left a breakfast sandwich on her nightstand, complete with a note written in his crooked handwriting. "Rest. I fed the cat. Call me if you need anything. C." Jasmine smiled, warmed by her brother's thoughtfulness. She forced herself upright, swinging her legs over the side of the bed and testing her weight carefully before hobbling to the bathroom. The face that stared back at her in the mirror looked older somehow, haunted, but also stronger. She splashed cold water on her cheeks and whispered, "You made it," savoring the truth of those words. Later that day, with the help of a neighbor, Jasmine made her way to the hospital, the tin box and bundle of letters safe in her backpack. The trip felt like a pilgrimage, each step heavy but purposeful. When she arrived at Miss Ford's room, the old woman was sitting up, a newspaper spread across her lap. She looked up at Jasmine, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Jasmine, you came back," she whispered. Jasmine smiled and gently placed the tin box and letters on the bed. Miss Ford's hands trembled as she opened the box, sorting through faded photographs. Smiling faces, a wedding, a tiny child on a pony. Moments from a life nearly lost to the storm. "I found them all," Jasmine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Every last one you asked for." Miss Ford shook her head in disbelief. "I thought it was all gone." "I can't thank you enough." They sat together, thumbing through the letters and photos. Miss Ford read aloud a line from her daughter's letter. "No matter how far I go, I'll always be your little girl." Tears streamed down her face, and Jasmine, moved beyond words, squeezed her hand. In those quiet moments, Jasmine realized that sometimes saving memories was as important as saving lives. As the hours passed, news of Jasmine's ordeal and the wild Mustang's intervention continued to ripple through Willow Bluff. The local paper ran a front-page story, "Young woman rescued by legendary Mustang, miracle at Willow Bluff." Social media lit up with speculation and praise, photos of Spirit galloping across the stormy ridge going viral. Jasmine found herself the reluctant center of attention, her phone buzzing with calls and messages from classmates, neighbors, and even reporters from out of town. But the attention brought more than curiosity. It brought action. People began checking in on their elderly neighbors, offering help with groceries, fixing storm-damaged roofs, and sharing updates on community message boards. Someone started a Facebook group, Willow Bluff Watch, where townsfolk posted tips about wild animal sightings, upcoming storms, and lost pets. For the first time in years, the town felt connected, bound together by a story that belonged to everyone. Jasmine noticed a change in herself as well. She felt braver, less alone. When she walked into the corner store, people greeted her with warmth and admiration, asking how she was healing, if she needed anything. Even old Mr. Wheeler, who rarely spoke more than a grunt, offered her a free soda and winked. The community's gratitude was overwhelming, but also healing. Jasmine realized she was not just surviving. She was part of something bigger. Miss Ford's story also took on new life. A nurse who had been caring for her, inspired by the tale of the lost letters, contacted Miss Ford's estranged daughter, Rachel, who now lived in Portland. Jasmine was there when Rachel called for the first time in years, Miss Ford's hands shook as she answered, her voice trembling as she said, "Hello? Rachel, is that really you?" There was a long pause. Jasmine could hear Rachel's muffled sobs through the receiver. Then words of forgiveness and longing tumbled out. They talked for nearly an hour, laughter and tears mixing in a conversation both had needed for years. After the call, Miss Ford turned to Jasmine, cheeks wet. "You gave me my family back, dear. You did what I couldn't." Jasmine hugged her tightly, both women weeping in relief and gratitude. Meanwhile, the town's newfound sense of unity led to something remarkable. At a town meeting that week, people brought forward stories of near misses during the storm, of neighbors helping neighbors, of how Spirit's legend had made them brave enough to ask for help or offer it. Inspired by Jasmine and Miss Ford, the community decided to form Willow Bluff Neighbors, a support network for elders, families in crisis, and anyone who needed a hand. Volunteers signed up to check on each other during storms, bring meals to shut-ins, and organize rides for hospital appointments. Jasmine watched it all unfold with a quiet pride. She realized the storm had done more than damage houses. It had stripped away the barriers that kept people isolated, revealing the strength they had when they stood together. She saw Spirit less often now, but every time she caught a glimpse of his silver mane on the distant ridge, she felt a wave of hope and gratitude. His presence had awakened something wild and good in the town, and in herself. As summer drifted in and the scars of the storm faded, Jasmine felt her own wounds healing, inside and out. She spent afternoons with Miss Ford, listening to old stories, helping her write new letters to Rachel. Caleb grew more independent, less anxious, proud of his big sister's courage. The town, once quiet and wary, now buzzed with laughter and plans for the future. For the first time since her mother's death, Jasmine let herself believe that things could get better, not just for her, but for all of Willow Bluff. And as the sun set each night, painting the bluffs in gold and violet, she whispered a silent thank you to the wild Mustang who had started it all, certain that Spirit was out there still, watchful, untamed, and a little bit magical. It was nearly July when Willow Bluff finally settled into its new rhythm, a blend of recovery and hope, the town's wounds knit together by collective effort and the faint echo of Spirit's legend. Jasmine spent her days moving through the routines of summer, but nothing felt quite the same as before. The town had changed, and so had she. One muggy afternoon, Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the mail with Caleb beside her, both of them fanning themselves with old envelopes. Most of the letters were bills or sympathy notes, but one caught her eye. A heavy cream-colored envelope stamped with the Willow Bluff Community Foundation logo. Jasmine opened it with a mix of dread and curiosity. Her heart skipped when she read the words inside. "We are honored to inform you that you have been selected as the recipient of the Eloise Ford Family Scholarship, established in memory of your mother, Sarah Price." Jasmine stared, then read it again. A scholarship? Her breath caught in her throat. It was more than just tuition. It was enough for books, for groceries, even enough to help keep the house. For a long moment, Jasmine couldn't speak. Caleb watched her, anxious. "Jazz, is it bad news?" She laughed, a real, unguarded sound that startled them both. "No, buddy, it's good, really good." She pulled him into a hug, holding tight as relief and gratitude swept through her. For the first time in months, the future wasn't a dark, unending road. There were possibilities now, choices she could make. The scholarship came with a letter from Miss Ford, written in her spidery hand. Your mother once helped me through a hard season. She believed in hope, even when the world seemed determined to take it away. I want you to stay, Jasmine. Stay in school, keep your home. You're part of this town's heart. Don't forget it. Jasmine wiped away tears, her thoughts tumbling. She didn't know what to say, how to repay a kindness that felt bigger than she could hold. She took the letter to her mother's favorite tree in the backyard and sat beneath its shade, letting the words wash over her, letting herself grieve and dream all at once. Meanwhile, news of the scholarship and Jasmine's story spread through town. At the grocery store, strangers congratulated her. At church, the pastor used her ordeal as a lesson in faith and perseverance. Social media posts multiplied, and even the local news wanted to run a follow-up segment about Jasmine, the wild Mustang, and the new community scholarship. But all the attention came with new questions. Friends and teachers asked Jasmine what she would do next. Some assumed she would leave Willow Bluff behind, use her scholarship as a ticket to someplace bigger and brighter. Others urged her to stay, to invest in the town that had rallied around her. Jasmine felt torn. She wanted more than anything to hold on to her home and the memories it carried, but she also felt a restlessness growing inside her, a longing for something new, a life not entirely shaped by loss. She talked it through with Caleb on a sticky evening, both of them sprawled on the porch, listening to the cicadas. "If you could do anything, Jazz, what would you do?" Caleb asked, propping his chin on his hands. Jasmine considered. "I'd go back to school, study social work maybe, or counseling. Something where I could help other families like ours, people who lost someone and didn't know how to start over." Caleb grinned. "That sounds perfect for you. Mom would be proud." Jasmine smiled, comforted by the thought. She ruffled Caleb's hair. "And you? What do you want to do?" He shrugged. "Get a dog or a skateboard, maybe both." They both laughed, the sound ringing out into the warm night. The next day, Jasmine met Miss Ford for lunch at the community center. The place was buzzing. Kids playing board games, volunteers sorting canned goods, elderly neighbors catching up over lemonade. At a long table in the corner, a group of townsfolk finalized plans for Willow Bluff Neighbors, the new support circle born out of the storm. Jasmine listened as Miss Ford explained how neighbors would check on each other, bring meals to those in need, and offer rides for anyone without transportation. It was a simple idea, but one that brought out the best in everyone. Miss Ford handed Jasmine a stack of flyers to deliver, then hesitated. "You know, Jasmine, you could be a leader here. People trust you. They look up to you." Jasmine shifted, uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm just doing what anyone would." Miss Ford squeezed her hand. "You did more than that. You helped us all remember what matters." That night, as Jasmine walked home, she passed the town bulletin board. Someone had posted a blurry photo of Spirit, mane flying, silhouetted against the storm. Beneath it, in scrawled marker, someone had written, "Hope is wild, but it finds a way." Jasmine stood there a long time, thinking about the choices ahead. She realized she didn't have to let go of the past to build a new future. She could stay in Willow Bluff, finish her degree online, help Caleb grow up strong, and still reach for something more. Maybe, just maybe, she could do both. The next week, the first meeting of Willow Bluff Neighbors filled the community center with laughter and light. Jasmine watched as people she'd known her whole life, some she barely spoke to before, came together, exchanging phone numbers, swapping stories, making plans. She realized the storm hadn't just torn things apart. It had stitched them together in new, unexpected ways. As summer deepened, Jasmine found herself more at peace. She visited Miss Ford often, helped plan community events, and started a small support group for young caregivers and grieving families. The house, once heavy with silence, rang with Caleb's laughter and the voices of new friends. Sometimes at sunset, Jasmine would hike up to Willow Bluff, watching the grass ripple in the breeze. She looked for Spirit on the horizon, sometimes catching a glimpse of him, wild and untamed, a living symbol of everything she'd learned. When the wind carried his distant whinny, Jasmine would close her eyes and whisper a quiet thanks, knowing that hope wasn't something you found and kept. It was something you shared, something you passed on. For the first time, the future felt open, bright with possibility. Jasmine knew there would still be storms ahead, but she also knew she would never face them alone again. And in the heart of Willow Bluff, her mother's legacy, kindness, resilience, and wild hope, lived on, stronger than ever. As August settled in with hazy skies and the cicadas' relentless chorus, Jasmine felt a quiet ache inside, a sense that something unfinished lingered, even as life began to blossom again. The scholarship funds had arrived. The Willow Bluff Neighbors Support Circle had found its footing, and every Sunday, the community center bustled with chatter and laughter. Caleb was thriving, less anxious, quick to smile, filling the house with the clatter of skateboards and hopeful plans for the new school year. Still, Jasmine carried a longing she couldn't quite name. Each night, as she looked out her bedroom window at the rolling green hills, her thoughts returned to Spirit, the Mustang whose wild courage had sparked her own. She remembered those electric moments, the storm, the desperate rescue, the miracle of survival. The story had woven itself through the town, a shared myth now, but for Jasmine it was personal, an unanswered question, a promise that still pulled at her heart. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky with streaks of gold and rose, Jasmine knew what she had to do. She packed a small backpack with water, an old photograph of her mother, and the battered envelope of letters she'd rescued from the farmhouse. She left a note for Caleb. "Gone hiking, back after dark. Don't worry, love you," and set off toward the bluff. The walk was familiar, the path overgrown but welcoming. Jasmine felt every step in her bones, the soft earth, the whisper of wind through tall grass, the distant rush of Willow Creek below. Shadows grew longer as she climbed, her mind drifting through memories, her mother's laughter, Miss Ford's gratitude, the faces of neighbors changed by kindness. Near the top, Jasmine paused beneath the old willow tree. She sat for a moment, legs folded, listening to her own breath. She took out her mother's photo, traced the smile with her thumb, and let herself cry. Grief and joy tumbling together, sweet and painful. She whispered all the things she hadn't said, asking for forgiveness, promising to keep the house a home, vowing to help others find their own way through loss. When the wind picked up, Jasmine stood and pressed on, determined to find Spirit, or at least to find the courage to say goodbye. The sky was deepening to blue, the horizon edged with twilight. She scanned the ridges, calling softly, "Spirit, are you out there?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper, but it felt important, like casting a wish into the wide world. For a long while there was only silence, broken by the rustle of grass and the distant call of an owl. Jasmine kept walking, following faint hoofprints and the memory of silver flashing against the storm. She reached the highest point on Willow Bluff, the place where she'd first locked eyes with Spirit. She waited, patient and still, watching the shadows stretch and the stars blink awake. And then, she saw him. At the far edge of the bluff, framed by the last light of day, stood Spirit, strong and wild, mane tossing in the wind. He lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes bright with something Jasmine felt in her very soul. Their gazes met, and for a heartbeat, the world felt suspended. Just girl and Mustang, joined by survival and longing. Jasmine stepped forward, heart pounding, tears streaking her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for helping me see that being lost isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning." Spirit snorted, stamping a hoof, and Jasmine smiled. "I'll never forget you, but I think it's time to let you go." She watched as Spirit tossed his head and took off, galloping across the bluff, his silhouette vanishing into the tall grass and deepening dusk. Jasmine stood in the hush that followed, letting her grief and gratitude wash through her. She felt lighter, as if the burden she'd carried for so long had shifted, become something she could use instead of something that held her down. On the walk back, Jasmine's mind spun with new ideas, ways she could channel her experience into something meaningful. By the time she reached the community center, the windows were glowing with warm light. She slipped inside, greeted by familiar faces and the gentle clatter of coffee cups. Willow Bluff Neighbors was in full swing, elders laughing over cards, parents swapping advice, a teen showing off a new guitar. Jasmine sat down with a group of young people, some she knew, some she didn't, and listened as they talked about loneliness, fear, and hope. When her turn came, Jasmine found her voice steady, strong. "You're not alone," she told them. "We all lose something. We all get scared. But there's always someone out there, maybe wild, maybe unexpected, who will show up when you need it most. And sometimes, you have to be that person for someone else." The group listened, eyes shining. Some shared their own stories, small confessions and big dreams. Jasmine felt the room fill with a sense of safety and connection. She realized this was what she wanted, to help other young people and families navigate the grief and uncertainty she'd lived through. She offered to start a peer support group, inviting anyone who needed a friend, a listening ear, or just a safe place to land. As the weeks went on, Jasmine's group grew. She spent her evenings organizing meetings, cooking simple dinners, offering rides, and sharing stories. The house on Maple Street became a haven again, not just for her and Caleb, but for anyone who needed it. She filled the walls with photos, laughter, and the hard-won hope that comes from surviving together. On the bluff, Spirit was sometimes spotted at dawn or dusk, his legend woven into the heart of Willow Bluff. For Jasmine, his memory was a reminder that healing was wild, unpredictable, and always possible, and that honoring the past wasn't about clinging to what was lost, but about opening your heart to what could be built, together. Years later, when the wind sang through the willows and the sun set behind the familiar bluff, people in Willow Bluff still spoke of the night the wild Mustang saved a life, and the girl who changed the town. The old stories lingered in every corner, in the laughter that echoed from the community center, in the candles glowing on porch steps during stormy nights, and in the quiet moments Jasmine Price spent at her kitchen window, watching for a flash of silver on the ridge. Jasmine was no longer the anxious college student who'd wandered the bluff after her mother's funeral, weighed down by grief and impossible choices. She had finished her degree, one late-night online class at a time, balancing essays with the everyday hustle of work and family. She stayed in the old house on Maple Street, which was now filled with noise, color, and people coming and going. Caleb had grown up, tall and good-hearted, helping neighbors fix fences and painting murals on the barn out back. He called Jasmine for advice, but he didn't need her in the same way. He'd found his own path, strong and steady. The Willow Bluff Neighbors group had blossomed too. What began as a handful of volunteers had grown into a vital network, teens running errands for elders, families hosting potlucks, strangers becoming friends in the afterglow of disaster. Jasmine's peer support group was now a regular part of community life. Young people found a safe haven there, a place to speak their truth without fear. Some came to heal, others stayed to help. Jasmine watched them. Kids she'd once worried would be lost to silence or loneliness, growing confident, connected, bold. Every so often, Miss Ford would join Jasmine on the porch. She was slower now, her hair more silver than white, but her eyes still shone with gratitude and mischief. They'd share lemonade and stories, sometimes sitting in companionable silence, both knowing how far they'd come. The rift with Rachel had healed, not all at once, but stitch by patient stitch. Rachel visited in the summers, her own children running wild through the yard, their laughter ringing out into the dusk. Jasmine often found herself reflecting on Spirit, the Mustang who had appeared when she needed hope most, then vanished again into legend. Townsfolk still claimed to see him at the edges of fields or watching from the ridge, especially after storms. Photos appeared online from time to time, a blur of silver mane, the glint of wild eyes in the morning mist. Some people believed Spirit was just a horse. Others swore he was something more, a guardian, a miracle, a reminder that some forces in the world can't be tamed. For Jasmine, the truth was simpler and deeper. Sometimes, she told the kids who came to her group, the wild shows up not to save us, but to remind us we can save ourselves and each other. It wasn't magic, but courage. It wasn't luck, but community. Spirit was hope, made flesh and bone, charging headlong through fear and uncertainty. On the anniversary of the storm, the town gathered at Willow Bluff for a celebration. Children rode ponies. The mayor gave a speech about resilience and togetherness, and elders lit lanterns for loved ones lost and found. Jasmine stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart full as she watched Caleb carry a toddler on his shoulders and Miss Ford laugh with her daughter. The town glowed with the warmth of connection, as if the storm had never happened, or perhaps as if it had taught them all exactly what they needed to know. As night settled in and the lanterns floated up, Jasmine climbed the bluff alone, carrying her mother's old blanket and a thermos of tea. She found her favorite spot beneath the willow tree, the same one where she'd once wept and whispered promises to the past. Above her the stars shimmered, the air sweet with honeysuckle. She spoke softly, as if to the wind itself. "Mom, I kept my promise. I made this house a home again. I helped where I could. I found hope and gave it away." She closed her eyes, feeling the earth solid beneath her. When she opened them again, a gentle breeze swept through the grass, and just for a heartbeat, Jasmine thought she saw Spirit on the distant ridge, mane streaming, watching over her and the town. Whether it was real or just the kindness of memory, she smiled, knowing the legacy would go on, no matter what. That night, as she walked home, Jasmine thought about what really lasted. It wasn't the house itself, though its walls now held 1,000 new memories. It wasn't just the scholarship, or the town's gratitude, or even the legend of the Mustang. The true legacy was compassion, measured not by what you kept, but by what you gave. Every act of kindness sent ripples through the world, changing lives in ways you might never see. She wanted the kids at her group to remember this, so she said it often. Hope is meant to be handed on. When someone shows you courage or love, don't keep it to yourself, pass it forward. That's how storms become stories, and stories become strength. And so, year after year, the story of Spirit became woven into the fabric of Willow Bluff. Parents whispered it to their children when thunder rolled. Elders reminded each other of Jasmine's courage whenever a neighbor needed help. And sometimes, on windy nights, if you listened closely, you could almost hear a Mustang's whinny carried on the breeze, wild, untamed, and full of promise. If Spirit's story touched your heart, share it. Tell it to a friend, to a neighbor, to someone lost or lonely. Because hope isn't something to hoard. It's the gift that keeps a town alive. Even in the loneliest places, a spark of kindness can light the way. And as long as stories are told, as long as hope endures, the wild will always find a way home.